All right. Welcome to 303 Garage Talks. Today, I have legendary race announcer Dave Towle. But I want to hear your 30-second speech before we get into it. Tell people who Dave Towle is. What do you tell people when you're on the elevator and they say, what do you do?
That's a good one. I say, you know what I say to make it easy? I'm like, I'm a live event announcer, because they get that, right? So
Yeah.
live event announcer, I might even throw in the term PA. That's getting technical, though. But then in the sport of cycling, and then for years, I would always go, like Lance Armstrong. And then they're like, that was all they needed to hear, I think. And then they would say, the first question is, do you do the Tour de France? Right, every racer and anyone associated. If you say, I work in cycling, the next question would be, what's your relationship with the Tour de France then?
Right?
Yeah.
So, but I know I listened to a podcast about you a little bit, and I've tried to do a little research, and you grew up in South Boulder.
Yeah.
And it seems that maybe the Coors Classic, maybe Red Zinger, I don't know exactly what period, but was kind of that launching pad for your interest. And what was the real catalyst for you just jumping in and making this is who you are? It's
funny that this just triggers for me this Davis-Finney thing. So I'm a little bit younger than Davis.
Okay.
Not that much younger, but it's really interesting what 3-4 years means when you're 16 and when you're 53, right? It's not much when you're our age now, but at the time, Davis was kind of so talking about, he was inspired, I think it's the 77 Zinger, right? And so my family moved to Colorado in 74, and we weren't going to the 75 or 76 Zinger, but my dad did take me down to that. So that I'm in the 5th grade. That would be the summer of 5th grade for me. And so that was the event, though, that inspired Davis to then get out and race. And within 2 years, he was winning at North Boulder Park. Okay. And my dad lived on the corner of North Boulder Park. This is 303 Cycling Podcast, baby, so we're in the heart of it.
Local.
Right. So on Delwood and 7th, there's a little alleyway, obviously where Doug Emerson lives and all the softball field there. Oh, yeah. You go all the way down that alley where you make the right-hand turn onto 7th. That would be Delwood. You turn onto Delwood there. His house was on that corner, so that was awesome living there. And so I started as a fan as a kid, but because my parents got divorced, as every family in Boulder did in the 70s. It was the thing to do. And my mom lived in a condo right next to where Michael Eisner lived. And that race office was in our orbit for every kid in that neighborhood. And so I got to work with the 81 Soviet team that came over. The classic term, gopher.
I heard about that.
Yeah. Badass.
Yeah.
Suko, that team was the greatest amateur group of cyclists that existed in any era, the Soviets. Now, you can talk about, it wasn't all on a level playing field. We can document that, what was happening in the Soviet Union and East Germany and stuff at that time was not above board. But they were badasses, and there was a mystique to them. It was like the Beatles a little bit when they came to Coors in '81. I mean, they brought the entire Olympic team that dominated. They won the team time trial. It was Oleg Logvin, Yuri Baranov, Yuri Kashirin, and Sergei Sukhorchenkov, and then another, that group of guys were the guys that came. It was the A's A team, and they were the thing at that year's event. And I was this American kid that was taking them to Rocky Mountain Records and Tapes to buy out the Rolling Stones section. We did it all, man. I mean, we went to a Target and bought boxes of toothpaste that they took home. But I was their broker. I was the one guy that spoke a tiny bit of Russian because I took a year at Fairview. And I saw them coming.
You took a year of Russian at Fairview?
I took 4 years at Fairview.
Really?
But I started when I was a ninth grader. Fairview at that time it still is, I think, 10th, 11th, 12th. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think they changed. Well, Southern Hills did become a middle school, whatever that is. In 9th grade, I was at Southern Hills. Okay. But I would go last class of the day and take Russian. So I knew 100 words. That was enough to do deals. We sold tires it was nuts. I was literally sold 500 sew-up tires. For them. I mean, it was
what they wrote.
I was a broker.
That's so funny. And then I heard something about you kind of made that leap to broadcasting with the Saturn. With Saturn.
You did your research, man.
I tried, man.
Thanks. This is a pro podcast. This is not. This is why I came down from Fort Collins.
I know. Thank you.
Yeah, I know exactly. Though I appreciate what you're doing with this, Bill. So, in all honesty, that the Saturn Cycling Classic was an event that was the pivotal moment in my life. You know, for the younger folks out there, like I'm 54 now, you will have a turning point. It will happen. I'm not saying anybody needs to reinvent themselves, but at some point, if you feel it, go for it. And I was doing, so basically the same thing. It's so circular, Bill, because what I'm doing with Zwift now was not that different than Saturn Cyberbike.
Because that was all on CompuTrainer.
Yeah, it was 4 CompuTrainers, plasma screens up. I mean, it was rudimentary, but people did the exact same concept. You're pedaling, making watts. It shows up on an icon on that screen, and you get to virtually race. And
what year was that?
That was 2001 and 2.
Wow, that's early in CompuTrainer. They were so buggy and oh, I can't imagine.
Yeah, Saturn threw some money at them, and they built some kind of a little more robust program that we ran. Oddly enough, my dad happens to go to a coffee shop in Seattle where that CompuTrainer group hung out.
Okay.
And so he was hip to CompuTrainer really early.
Oh yeah.
And like, you know, my dad's in his 70s, and he was the one that tipped me. He's like, "This Zwift thing is neat, Dave. You should reach out to them." It was the best advice I ever got.
That's cool.
I should credit Clark Sheehan too for that, but.
And then did you ever announce the Coors Classic or any of them?
No, not even close. Because so by the time Coors ended, it was basically '88. I was basically a bike shop rat a grommet at that point.
Okay.
Well, you know, working in the High Wheeler in Boulder, and but nowhere even near announcing. I didn't start announcing until 2003.
That was your first.
The last Saturn Cycling Classic that Chris Weary won, another Boulder kid.
Okay. So what was your first outdoor race?
It's funny. So Chris Weary, who was U.S. Pro Road Champion, and was a big name, one of the best racers ever to come out of Boulder, but really never got the credit he deserved. But rode for Health Net and was just one of the big pros at Saturn during his day, and an awesome guy. Lives in Durango now. But Chris in my life I was lucky enough to spend a lot of Thanksgivings at his house during one period. His mom was so tremendous. Oh, she went to a lot of races, so I got to know her doing amateur racing, and they were so friendly, the Wearies. And they just became kind of family, really. And so that race, Saturn Cycling Classic, I show up. We're doing our Cyberbike dog and pony show. And I'm happy with that at that point. You know, I'm pulling a monthly salary, and but I'm a little unhappy that I'm not the guy announcing. You know what? I live by a train.
Yeah.
We can keep going, right?
Yeah. We'll just keep going.
Right.
It's garage,
So that day, I show up for our Saturn Cyberbike thing, and I hear rumors that there's no announcer. And I'm sort of like, that's interesting. Like, who would be the next best guy? And so, luckily, Len Pettyjohn, the organizer, was like, "Hey, Dave Towle, you want to announce until Jeff gets here?" And it was an issue that he started the race in Boulder, and there was an accident on I-70, and that's how you got up to Breck. And that race was 140 miles, but they didn't go on 70. Yeah. They went over.
Like the triple bypass.
Yeah,
basically.
it was nuts. It was nuts. Guanella.
Yeah.
Oh My God Road.
Right.
Where you can fall 2,000 feet with no guardrail.
Right.
Oh my God. I ended up doing a good hour alone of that race. Just jumped in. Wasn't really very nervous. Like, felt pretty good about it, and was just talking about the story of the race as it was coming over the radio. And because I loved cycling so much, I knew the dudes, and there was no women's race at that time. And Chris's dad died that week. He died on Tuesday afternoon. This was a Saturday race, and Chris is still racing, and he had his dad's wedding ring. It sometimes makes me cry when I tell this story. So he was wearing his dad's wedding ring, around a chain around his neck, and the story is just like, it's like breaking away, where you're like, this can't be real, it's too scripted, it's just insane, it gives me goosebumps now, right? And so Weary's in a group of 12, and they've got 5 minutes, and it's like, they're never going to do it, everybody. I'm like, they're going to do it, you know, and the crowd's like getting interested, and then it was just this magical thing where like honestly, your people estimate crowds. Well, I'll tell you, I've seen it all. I've seen full-on Tour of California crowds. I did every stage of every Tour of California, right? I've seen those crowds. I know when it's a shitty crowd. I know when it's legit, and you know, this was as legit as it gets. They're 5 deep. For all the way you can see up Main Street in Breckenridge, and that goes up to that split there where I forget the name of that hotel, but there's kind of an intersection up there that's pretty major when you're coming in.
Right.
Yep. So So, I mean, it is packed with people, and the story is just like, okay, now it's a group of 6. Chris Weary is hanging on. Then like, oh my God, Chris Weary's attacked. Chris Weary's out of the group. And people are like, what's going on? Who's this Chris Weary guy? And then I see Chris's mom and sister and brother. And I'm like, hey, you guys. And they come over, and they're like, oh, you're doing so great. It's so great. I can't believe you're announcing. This is so cool. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, can I tell the story of like Chris's life and what's happening, or is it too private, you know?
Right.
And they really just said, you tell that story, you know? And so when people heard that his dad died just a few days earlier, they were so invested in it, right? And so then, you know, all of a sudden it's like, Chris is now in a breakup. They're going over Indiana Pass. This is it. He's now in a group of 2. It's him and this dude named Soren Pedersen, a Danish guy who was on Saturn at that time. Chris is riding for another team, Mercury. And so it's those 2, and they're alone. And as they come over the top, then we're starting to get a lot more information on the radio, and then Chris attacks, and he comes in solo and wins. And like his brother's there waving the checkered flag. And people had that cathartic, once-in-a-lifetime sporting moment.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it transcended cycling. It was same way, you know, like when you watch Breaking Away, and you see Dave Stoller winning, and you're just like, damn, you know, that's what makes me love the sport so much.
Well, you and I are the same age, and I grew up in Golden, went to Wheatridge High School. The Kiefel family was pretty notorious in that area, of course. And I was into soccer and basketball. I rode bikes for fun, but I had a couple friends that were really into biking, and it was really hard to get good information and to really follow it. You had to jump in with both feet and then more to really become a fan of cycling. How did you do that?
You know what? That's a really good question. You know, like, so bizarrely, I had access to like the most recent everything coming out of Europe because of the Coors Classic Race Office. You could go there and it was like a cycling library. It was not only historic, but you know, the latest issue of Miroir de Cyclisme was coming from France, and you know, didn't read French, but I could read cycling French.
Okay.
And I could certainly look at pictures.
Yeah, right.
And so you've got that, and you've got British Cycling Weekly would come. Like, they were stale. They were a month old when we got them, but that was better than anybody else was doing by far. And I mean, you know, we'd go down to the Boulder Public Library every day during the Tour de France to see the New York Times. You could get your hands on a top 10 usually from most stages in a top 10 GC every day. That was the limit of the information. And then at that time, you would remember that Winning magazine that would come out.
Yeah.
Like that was about 2 months after the tour.
Okay.
That would come out, and that would just be these glossy pictures, and you would see what the skin suit that Charlie Motet was wearing, and the special seat that you know, all the cool stuff. And but yeah, so I had kind of a front row seat during that magical era.
It wasn't easy.
I mean, when my friend got sick or was in a car accident, really injured, because of the Coors, Eddie Merckx visited him in the hospital in 1984.
Oh wow.
Yeah, happened to be in Colorado. Eisner talked him into going and visiting Jeff Albert in Boulder Memorial, which is up where that hospital's closed now, up on Mapleton and 4th.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. It was a sanatorium at one point.
Yeah, I know. They wiped it down,
Yeah, that's now where Andy, a lot of Boulder Center for Sports Medicine, right, yeah.
Well,
Neil Henderson.
I just think so I love hearing you talk. I don't follow pro cycling that deeply, but I just love the way that you know it inside and out. You pronounce names really well, by the way.
Thanks,
I
I try.
how you do that. But there had to be a point, maybe in your 20s or late teens or later in your 20s, when you loved it, you knew you loved it, but you have to make that choice to make it your life, to really be successful at it. Because you might have had interest in something else. The money's tough in this industry. Maybe to really make a lot of money, maybe you had different aspirations. But was there a pivotal moment when you said, damn it, this is what I want to do. I don't care what the money is. I love cycling. I'm going to jump in with everything I got.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question too. I think that a lot of it comes down to investing in yourself, right? Like, so if you want to be a stand-up comedian, awesome, good luck. And you better write at least 5 minutes of solid material before you show up at Comedy Works in Denver, and like you'll spend 3 months trying to get onto stand-up, or open mic night
Yeah.
And same thing with this. So I figured out that if I want to announce bike races, people weren't going to provide a PA for me, and I had no credibility. There was no reason why they should. And so Brian Ludzinski and Clark Sheehan were both critical there, where they Clark bought my first PA for me, and I paid it off by announcing a summer of Tuesday night races down at Mile High. I don't remember those. Clark organized these races in a very unique format, and he was just thinking outside of the box, and he was just retiring as a pro and trying to figure out his next thing. And so he knew he needed an announcer, and he deserves I really am thankful to him for that. But I paid it off too. I worked $100 a race or something, and paid off what was a $1,200 PA. And I got to be honest, getting rid of that PA is the greatest thing that you ever do as an announcer. Once you move to the point where other people have to provide it, that's when you've arrived.
Right.
And man, it's not about anything other than, is this your damn PA? Because that thing was just a nightmare. But it certainly was investing in myself. And then I could go to Brian Ludzinski, who was doing the Tuesday night short tracks out at the Research Center in Boulder. And those were really, like Mara Abbott showed up, not even a bike racer. She just showed up and said, what's going on here? This looks cool. Amy Dombrowski, we had so many cool people that would come and race. Travis Brown was the legend out there. But it was community. Yeah. And I had my own PA. So I could show up, and it was like a pirate ship, right? No one would tell,
you could just practice all you wanted.
No one was stopping me from practicing.
Right.
And so I got to know the racers, and I became part of the community, and I really loved those guys. And I felt like I was one of them, the Alex Candelarios, and they made me feel like I was part of their family. I wasn't a racer, but I was important. Right. And I think that's really the best thing you can do for people is, if they're working and trying and helping you with your project, recognize that, because you'll get so much more out of them, and then they'll get more out of the experience, and then you can help them make that jump to being a professional bike race announcer.
Well, you think about an author, and you talk to maybe somebody who writes books, and they will tell you the best thing they can do to their craft is to read a lot.
Sure.
Right? And then
Amen.
And you might aspire. Who is announcing that is it a Kurt Gowdy? Was it a Vin Scully? Was it a more of a was there somebody that really
inspires you? Bill, I really appreciate this conversation because oddly it's not any of that really. As a kid, I used to, in college at least, or at CU, I'd do this Johnny Most imitation. He was the announcer for the Celtics. Yeah. And there was a lot of DJ Diddles with that kind of stuff. And that was always funny. And I thought, there's a power to voice. And you could see it with friends, right? When I would do the Johnny Most, everyone would laugh, right? I could get everybody laughing, and I was like, this is powerful shit.
Yep. Words matter.
They do. And delivery matters, and timing matters, and content matters. All those things matter. And so what was the question?
Well, was there an announcer out there that...
No, it wasn't Kurt Gowdy, or, it was... I think what happened was I went to the 2000... The 2000 Cyclocross Nationals were in the Presidio, which is part of San Francisco, and it was really, really unique event. It was a tempest in a teapot, as William Shakespeare would say. But so I listened to the dudes doing it. It was a guy named Chris Zigmont and Richard Fries, and they were really into it. They had this passion, energy. They were super knowledgeable, and they were definitely part of that community. They were really, really. They were authentic. Yeah. And so all the other guys doing the bigger road races in America and stuff, they were there to cash a paycheck, I swear. I just felt that they didn't know who the racers were. They had to look at the list. And when the finisher would win, or the winner would finish, they would have to be looking down at the number, and it'd take them 10 seconds. And I'm like, that sucks. You can do better. And these guys at the Presidio, Fries and company, they nailed it. They knew every racer, even the 38th place guy, when he came through, they knew. I was like, that's more the style I'd like to have. And then Richard had all these zingers, really funny lines.
You have good ones. I want to talk about that.
Yeah. I had to develop my own, but I certainly, going back to the stand-up comic thing, it's really hard not to plagiarize material at first.
Yeah.
And so now I hear people steal my stuff I don't even say steal. Well, it's fine.
I stole on like Donkey Kong once.
There you go.
Just cause.
I think it's open source. To be honest, I'm flattered.
Oh, good. Yeah, I used it in an article, I think.
Good.
I can't remember.
Good.
But I've interviewed Mike Riley. Do you know Mike Riley?
No.
He's the voice of Iron Man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure I do. Yeah, I don't know him personally, but
he's a good dude.
You are an Iron Man, right?
Yeah.
That is one of those. That's worth the $50 of your entry fee, right there, right?
Well, yeah.
I'm sorry if I just blew out your.
No, it's.
I could do that all day long. I recommended myself for that job. A trip to Kona. Yeah.
But he's interesting because a couple things that he said one time really resonate with me, and I'm guessing this might resonate with you, that he said the most valuable thing a person has in their life is their name. And he doesn't want to get it wrong. And when people cross the line, he takes a lot of pride in making sure he gets those names right.
Heck yeah, I get it. One of my most frustrating things is this conversation could be its own podcast, but names can be, like I have a friend, Kurt Levy. Well, Sarah Levy is another racer I know, right? And so you're like, is it Levy or Levy? It's whatever they want it to be. It's their name, right? And so oftentimes, I've always said, man, if I'm getting it wrong, shame on me. So if you could nicely let me know, because I'm a human being too. And so, there's incidents of being at, USA Cycling Road Nationals with some guy, 30 feet away from you, with the Rolling Stones playing through speakers behind you, with him screaming at you. He's pissed because you're pronouncing his daughter's last name wrong, right? It's his name. And I get that 100%. But if you're screaming at me from 30 feet away, we're not making progress. One, you're just irritating me, and I'm much, much better since I started taking CBD. but in all honesty, that kind of stuff, it's like, man, you get more flies with honey than with vinegar. And the person that comes around is like, hey, Dave, I swear, you don't even have to flatter me, right? You don't have to say, I love your announcing, but it can just be, hey, man, I'd appreciate it if you could, my family's name is Plock, not Ploak. Right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and then I'd be like, thank you, right on. Note to self, and I will get it right from then on. I might slip a time or two, but I care. I 100% care. And be nice.
Yeah, it's important, right?
Oh man, it's awful when you have so I have a name that's been mispronounced by 80% of the people throughout my entire life.
I'm sure.
Right? Yeah. So I'm very aware.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing Mike talked about was we talked about what it's like to be an announcer at a live event, and he gets nervous because he's got to get people started on time and so forth. And I was thinking about your situation. You're not just play-by-play, but you're really kind of making the race happen.
Oh, it's a circus, and you are the director, right? Or what do you call that guy?
That's a lot of responsibility.
Well, I feel it is, because you start a Tour of California stage late by 1 minute, and you might throw off this very delicate schedule with the CHP and going over the Golden Gate Bridge, and they had this window, and now because the national anthem singer went long, I learned so much about timing and scheduling, and things that you wouldn't get if you weren't an announcer, but when you're talking with the mayor right before the national anthem, you don't hand him the mic because he's not going to give it back. He's a mayor. And his town paid $150,000 to have this bike race here, right? And so he knows that this is a chance for him to sell him. So imagine if you gave Donald Trump the mic, right? You're not getting it back. Right. So you learn these things and how to make it happen. And that's something that people might not appreciate, the stress of starting an event on time and sort of or
in a crit, making sure you're keeping track of the loops correctly, you don't misspeak that this is the last loop and it actually wasn't, or
that is something that hopefully you only do once in your life. And I think any announcer who's done, if your body of work is, I've done more than 1,000 days of race announcing now, right? I've made that mistake, and it was painful facing the racers afterwards and trying to explain what happened. And the best thing, again, life lesson here, and I think you probably want to wrap it up, but
no, we're good.
Okay, good.
We're going to keep moving.
All right, is that own it, man. We had an incident at Gila one year and an incident at Iron Horse in Durango one year where the Durango one was my fault, no doubt. But the Gila one, I don't know. But what those racers did not need to hear when they came around and were completely enraged and had every right to be was me saying, wasn't me, man. Talk to that fifth, That was not what they needed to hear. And I'm so happy that in the way I responded to that at that time, and that was a turning point too, was own it, take the heat then, rather than kicking the can down the road, because it's going to be worse when it catches up to you.
Well, one thing I really appreciate about you on a personal level is I've had 2 instances where at VeloSwap last year, and Saris was doing
Oh,
a
yeah, that was
squat
fun.
challenge. And Rich to this day still says, "Man, he made me pedal so hard," because it was just this one-off event. And you were like, "Yeah," and
He's a rented mule.
Yeah, everybody's getting into it.
I think it makes people think that other people are looking at them, right? And so that's what does it.
And you do such a good job of that. But then I did Haute Route a couple years ago.
Oh yeah.
And we're strung out for hours, and you're just sitting there for all day long up in Breckenridge. I totally remember
it was fun though
at that hotel, and you made it. I was near the end, and you still made it seem like it was. Yes, get there. The last.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? What's your motivation there?
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'm lucky to be there for one.
Yeah.
Never have lost that. Maybe I did. Actually, I think around 2010, 11, I went through a real slump in my life, personally, across the board, and I didn't appreciate being there anymore. And so it took some real soul searching and to get back to that vibe. And I love it. I love seeing. Someone the other day was asking me, "Who's your favorite racer?" And I was thinking, that's a good question. I really like Rowan Dennis and stuff, but that's not my favorite racer. My favorite racer is you. Like the guy, or maybe not you specifically,
right.
But my favorite racer is the 38-year-old Cat 4 that has his girlfriend out there cheering for him, who was nervous as heck to do it, paid his entry fee, showed up on time, pinned his number, bought his bike at the local bike shop, has worked really hard to try to be ready, and is scared shitless. That's my favorite racer.
Yeah, I get that. Well, let's pivot to the Colorado Classic in a second, but you brought up something that made me think about something I did on research. When I Googled your name, strangely, the first thing that came up was an event 3 years ago when you had pancreatic problem with and Cyclocross Magazine did some kind of article, and there was a GoFundMe site.
Yeah.
Talk about maybe how the community who rallied around you inspires you.
Yeah. The really weird thing about that was, I think about it a lot, especially with the trouble that we're having right now, right? And a lot of people are struggling out there. And I've been really lucky because that really made such a huge difference. And it was like nobody. So one of the biggest gifts that I've ever been given in life was that, because so now I'm doing better than ever. Like physically, but the emotional part really was, I got a chance to die and find out that people cared about
that's
you.
My question.
Yeah, and that's something that so few people get. Like, I might as well have died in a lot of ways because that's how people responded. Like, and so you look back. I don't do it now because it just doesn't do me any favors too. But at that time, it was so overwhelming, and it went on for a month of people reaching out, and I never felt better about just sort of existing than then. And it certainly made me recognize the power of your words too. Like Marcel Van Garderen just had a bike crash.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think he broke his hip, or it's like,
did.
I looked at that actually. Yeah. And so I was thinking, you know what? I could just look at that and say like, oh man, poor Marcel, he's such a nice dude, and I really like Marcel. He's one of the people at the races, like at Colorado Classic, that always cares, always asks how you're doing, always has a wry smile, and he knows what's up. And I was like, I could just pass this by and think about Marcel, or I could write a quick note and say, dude, love you, sorry bud.
He's awesome.
What more can I really do? But I just thought to myself, like, oh yeah, man. When you have 100 people do that for you, and I bet you 100 people have on Marcel's site now, or on his Facebook, but I know that makes a big difference when you're sitting there all busted up in the hospital and you're watching that crappy TV that, just the vibe in the hospital these days has got to be at an all-time crappy level.
Yeah.
Like those poor healthcare workers are so overwhelmed, and Marcel's so positive. So going back to that, I realized the impact that so many people had on me. Yep. So thanks everybody for that. And I mean, it really allowed me to be in so much better of a life situation, and I've been trying to keep that going.
Well, I hear you. Well, let's pivot to the Colorado Classic a little bit. I want to talk about that because we partner with them, and you obviously did the announcing for that. It was a great event last year.
Yeah.
I thought the crowds, Steamboat, Avon was a pretty well.
I thought Steamboat was.
It was okay.
Yeah, and you got to remember that's a weekday in a pretty small, remote mountain community.
It wasn't in town though, unfortunately.
No.
I thought that was
we
bad.
did some USA Pro Challenge stuff out there at that kind of rodeo venue. Either way.
But Golden was amazing. Denver was good. It was hot as hell, and so.
I don't even remember that.
So
that's how
hot.
focused I was on the whole thing. I don't even remember it being hot.
It was so hot, and. Now with COVID going on, who knows what's going to exactly happen with that race. But talk about the dynamic you felt in that race, going to the women's only format, and maybe how covering a women's race is different.
So, all right, I'm gonna unpack that one by starting with the last part. Racing is racing, Bill. I when I do paracycling events or when I do Zwift events or anytime that I make this joke about, when the first bicycle was made 145 years ago or whatever, it was about a week before there was a second bike, right? There had to be a period of time where your garage had more bikes than the world had. Right? And so as soon as the first bike was made, they're making the second. Well, once that second bike was made, there was a bike race within 5 minutes. Think about that. And that's human nature, right? It just means that these dudes who are making these things, they realize, man, once we get two of these, we can find out who's faster, right? Yeah. And that has continued till today, and bike racing will never die. It's just going to reinvent itself here. But Colorado Classic, so the racing was racing. I thought that what they did with the dynamic of going to women's only, they handled that so well. Lucy Diaz and Ken Gart and their team, amazing job. So when you VF Corporation, it shows that you want to do it professionally, work with professionals. And I was super honored to be there because for years they had focused on just using all women announcers. And so me being there was a major change, right?
That's true, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so I'm sure that there was some pushback somewhere out there from some people. Luckily, I learned in 2013, don't read the comments, don't read this stuff. It doesn't do you any favors. And so I don't really know. But I do know that we had a great time, and Janelle and myself really worked well together.
You did, yeah.
Yeah, she's so cool.
You guys did a great job.
And she has energy, and she has passion, and I felt like I never felt like a fish out of water, like being a dude there. Yeah. And I think that they kind of recognized that they're like that ringleader thing that we were talking about. Like, well, there's something to my body of work of having started 100 Tour of California stages, every Tour of Ireland, Utah, Georgia, Missouri. There's value to that. Yeah. And there's a negative, like, hey, if you had bad habits or you make statements like you like the women's race, well, wait for the main event. The men are coming up. That kind of BS doesn't play anymore. And I've heard other male announcers doing that last year. And it's like, man, you guys aren't getting it. Right. Like, you should have never been doing that stuff. But if you still don't reckon, if you're so unwoke that you can't recognize that there's been major changes out there, and maybe you were taking the right path the whole way, but maybe you needed to correct a little. And I mean, we've seen in the announcing world, like of the 10 guys that you were saying were doing it, I think 3 of them are now no longer really, doing it for various reasons, right? And so it makes me even more honored to be there, and even more honored to be at the Colorado Classic.
Talk about Chloe.
Badass, one of the greatest athletes of our time, and a lot of people are like, wow, I mean, this lady is crushing this race. But Americans relate to star power. Colorado Classic is an American bike race, and so I think people really. I mean, I listened to 5 years Tour de Georgia. Where's Lance? Right, that's all people cared about when they came, and I get it. So rather than try to be like, well, I don't know, but you should care about this other racer. It's more like give them the answer. He's over there, right? Like, and I mean, so that's what they came for. Serve them that. If they came for pizza, serve pizza. And I think if they come for stars, Chloe Dygert has all the things. She's got the Red Bull helmet. She's got that. In no way, Chloe's a sweetheart, but she's a little cocky on the bike. You're not going to mess with Chloe,
right? Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
I thought that last stage where she didn't have to win it. She could have coasted through the peloton.
But you know what? It's like Eddie Merckx. You don't give gifts. If I'm the best bike racer and I can win, I'm going to win. I'll be honest. Like, I'm no Chloe Dygert, right? I don't have 1/100th the talent or drive or ability. But I do know that one part of her that I do think I have is I like to win too. I like to be the best, and I'll win every time I can. Yeah. If we're going to have a who's the best announcer in America competition, I'll try to win.
Yeah. So
And if they have 100 of them, I'll try to win 100.
what are you doing now without these? What's your life like nowadays? Obviously.
Well, literally, like I'm going to zip home from here, and because of COVID, like my biggest frustration, one of them in this world, is printer ink. Seriously.
No, I get it because my daughter.
It's ridiculous, man. Like, how did we end up in a world where you've done this to us, printer ink people? Like, and again, I realize this. Like now, Epson's going to be like, well, we're out at the Colorado Classic. That Towle guy's an asshole. But I mean, these tiny little cartridges, and it's like I printed up my tax forms the other day, and it blew out the cartridge, and now I can't print up a start list for Redlands, and I can't. I've tried for a week to get a cartridge, right? And I got yelled at outside of Best Buy because I didn't have a mask, so I wore a pillowcase around my and still didn't get the cartridge. So, but Redlands starts tonight.
Okay.
Virtual Redlands.
Yeah.
And so literally this will make 6 days of announcing, and some days we do 2 or 3 races on Zwift.
Okay.
So, and I'm also working on a project with the Alzheimer's Association where we're doing a virtual charity ride for them.
Cool.
Like I was on a conference call with that earlier. It's really weird how I heard someone saying with the COVID situation that, it's the bigger companies and events and stuff that are going to have trouble. And so I think my flexibility and like not being big in anything, like I just started an LLC for the first time this year, like, and just sort of like kind of moving into a new era.
Yeah.
But I'm super flexible, and because of that, I'm lucky. I mean, I get it, man. There's bike race announcers out there that just don't have any announcing to do, but I've been doing more than I ever have.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, but I can't stand people who are cocky or jerks about stuff, and so I'm so appreciative of that.
Well, you do a really good job on Zwift. I've been tuning in just on USA Cycling.
You're the guy.
I just like letting the phone sit there and I'm working. It's like watching the tour in the background, and it's just you
telling some story about Sean Kelly's bike or something.
Yeah, you're still telling the stories and keeping engaged. And well, I want to wrap up. I could talk all day, honestly.
This has been so much fun.
But I have 3 questions.
Okay.
We ask all our guests. Tell me your favorite place in the world.
Yeah, can I never answer a question with a question, right? But so in the sense of like my happiest place, I think oddly enough, I love Ireland so much. And yeah. So I mean, I just love the culture. My ex-wife is Irish, so I lived in Cork for a few years, and yeah, I would probably say, that's a weird choice, isn't it? But it's more based on community culture vibe, and I mean, I was really lucky to be around a lot of really great people, and that makes a big difference. Yeah. But I mean, you could say, like, I think Australia is a super neat place, or Hawaii's. I've never been to Hawaii, but I think it's super cool. But I would go for having a cup of tea in Ireland watching Eurosport.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so then next question: what's been your best decision so far in 2020? Besides coming here.
Yeah, actually, this is pretty close. I haven't made a lot of good or bad decisions in 2020. I think that, I'm going to go with the whole experience of like starting my own business, and the LLC thing has been really fun. I kind of figured like if there's ever been a time, with more time on your hands, sort of that would be it, is deciding to go legit.
Yeah. And last question for you, and I'm really curious what this answer will be, because you may not have one. If you weren't doing what you do, what would be that dream career that you might have chosen?
Yeah, so I only went to University of Colorado for a couple of years, and kind of more like a night school kind of dude think, right? And I love marketing. I love ads. I love that world of creativity. I enjoy, like, that's a big part. Cycling always has a marketing kind of element to it,
Sure.
Like new brands, new things. What are they doing? How do you activate? And I think I've learned a lot of sort of, not the lingo, I'm no expert on it, but I think I would love to be working for a marketing PR firm kind of thing. I think that would be really, really cool. It's creative.
It's kind of what you are. You are a marketing person in many ways.
A lot of times for companies, I write ad copy for them that they don't want. Right?
They get stuck with it.
Amgen was awesome. I got to tell that story with one of my partners at the very beginning. We went in, and Amgen flew us to Thousand Oaks, and sort of like, did you get the bouquet of flowers in your room and the fruit plate and all the things? And I mean, they are really, in the early years, they really laid out the red carpet. And we're in this meeting, and they're really just trying to explain to my colleague and I, this is pre-Brad Soner. I won't give you the dude's name. But yeah, and so they're being so kind and professional. And so I won't say too much more about the whole thing other than he is constantly jumping in with so they're like, yeah, so our program is going to be break away from cancer. And this is our tagline. And it'll be, it takes a team to beat cancer. And then he would jump in with, well, you should, or one of the things I would add, or, and they're like, after about 20 minutes of this, someone who hadn't said a word at the table, and there's 8 other Amgen people, but they're all talking to us too. They're the whole thing is, look, we're putting $5 million into this thing that we don't know that much about, and we've learned that you two knuckleheads are the voice of this event. So if we can't get our messaging through to you, it's going to be screwed up for the entire thing, right? Yeah. So here, have another, what do you love, steak sandwich? Have another steak sandwich. And let's talk more about what we're about, right? Yeah. And then so finally this guy stands up and he's like, I'm sorry, but we're not really looking for any feedback on our marketing positions or, whatever he said. But basically it was the most gracious shut the F up. And from then on, but it was really good for me to hear that because I wasn't the one chiming in with ideas, but I recognized these people went to Harvard and
right.
They have got study groups. They have spent already on this project. They're $250,000 into this concept of break away from cancer. You don't need to.
Yeah.
They got it. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of lessons along the way. Maybe the biggest one though was, negativity is never going to get you anywhere in that world. And I really like your feedback. I've really tamed myself on stuff like Facebook of when you see stuff that you're like, that person is full of it. This is ridiculous. I don't like this being projected, or that's a flat out non-truth or lie. Right. And now I just have to let it all go because it's not my job to police this world. I laugh at the high horse community is at. They're on top of their game right now with everything, and I get it, but again, take care of your own house, right?
Well, let's wrap up with give us an on like Donkey Kong.
Oh man, all right. Let's use Chloe Dygert, right?
Yeah.
Chloe Dygert hits out 1 kilometer to go. It's on like Donkey Kong.
Perfect.
You got to sell it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.